A text message, a locked back door, and a man who knows how pressure works. Welcome to Cheating Wives Among Us. This is Russ Donovan's story. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She'd left it behind. First time she ever did that. Sloppy. Or maybe she just didn't care anymore. The screen lit up and the name said, Jim, schedule update. The message said, left the back door unlocked, come whenever. I read it once, read it again. Then I set the phone back exactly where it was, screen down, and rolled over. I fix things for a living, pipes, boilers, water heaters, garbage disposals, 15 years in the trade, first 3 under my dad, the last 12 running my own shop after his heart gave out. You work with pressurized systems long enough, you develop a feel for it, this hum in the copper right before something gives. The joint sweats, the fitting groans, you can hear it if you're paying attention. Most people aren't. I'd been hearing that sound in my marriage since summer. I got up at 5:30 the next morning, same as always, made coffee in the old drip machine that Holly's been asking me to replace for 2 years. Packed my thermos, black, no sugar, same since I was 19, and my dad handed me one on my first real job. Checked my schedule, 3 calls today, leaky shutoff valve on the north side, a water heater swap in Broad Ripple, and a rental unit in Fountain Square where the tenant said the toilet was making noises. They always say that. It's never the toilet. It's the fill valve, or the flapper, or the supply line, and it takes 10 minutes, but they act like the house is haunted. I ate a piece of toast standing at the counter and looked out the kitchen window at the yard. Leaves needed raking. The back deck, the one I built 3 summers ago, every board cut and stained by hand, had a couple of loose railings I'd been meaning to tighten. The truck sat in the driveway, my old F-150 with 187,000 miles on her and rust creeping up the wheel wells like ivy. Holly came downstairs at 7. She looked good. She always looked good lately. New blouse, the kind with a collar that sits just right. Perfume I didn't buy, something lighter and sweeter than what she used to wear. Her hair was done even though it was a Tuesday, and she was going to sit behind a desk. She kissed me on the cheek. Quick, dry, the kind of kiss you give a relative at Thanksgiving. I'll be late again tonight, she said, filing deadline. Okay, she poured coffee into a travel mug, checked her phone, she'd found it, obviously, and didn't look at me once, not once. And that was the thing, really. It wasn't the text. It wasn't the new perfume or the underwear I found in the laundry last week, tags still on, the kind she never wore for me. It was the not looking. She hadn't really seen me in months. I was furniture. I was the guy who made the mortgage payment and fixed the faucet and drove Tommy to Little League on Saturdays. Tommy came downstairs with his backpack half-zipped and his shoes untied. 9 years old and already has my jaw and his mother's eyes. He looked at me with that wide open face kids have before the world teaches them to close it. Dad, can I come on a job with you this weekend? You bet. The kind where you crawl under a house. If that's the one that comes up, sure. He grinned. Lily was still asleep. She's 6 and would sleep until noon if you let her. Holly grabbed her keys and walked out without saying goodbye to anyone else. The garage door went up, then down. Her car pulled away. I rinsed my mug, grabbed my toolbox, and headed out. The truck started on the 3rd try, same as always. Classic rock on the radio. Thermos wedged between the seat and the console. I pulled out of the driveway and went to work, because there's always work. Here's something people don't think about. A plumber who's been working in the same city for 15 years doesn't just fix pipes. He builds a web. Not on purpose. It just happens. You go into somebody's house and you see how they live. You see the family photos, the prescriptions on the counter, the kids' drawings on the fridge. You know who's getting a divorce before their friends do because you see the empty closet and the single toothbrush. You know who's drinking too much because the recycling bin's full of bottles. And it's Tuesday. People talk to you while you work. They tell you things they wouldn't tell their priest because you're kneeling under their sink, and somehow that makes you harmless. Over 15 years, I'd been inside more than 300 homes across Marion County. I knew the city like I knew the inside of a pipe wall. Every joint, every fitting, every weak spot. So when I started dropping a line during house calls, I wasn't being clever. I was being efficient. It went like this. I'd finish the job, write up the invoice, and during the small talk at the door, I'd say something like, "Holly's been working late a lot lately, been eating dinner alone most nights." Not sad, not fishing for sympathy, just mentioning it. The way you'd say the weather's been dry, the Kowalski place, north side, young couple, early 30s, new baby, leaky shutoff valve under the kitchen sink. Standard fix. Kim Kowalski stood in the doorway while I worked, bouncing the baby on her hip, asking about water pressure. When I mentioned Holly's late nights, Kim's face did that thing women's faces do when they're filing something away. She didn't say anything pointed, just, "That's rough. You guys should do a date night." But I could see the gears turning. Old Teddy Garza on Prospect Street, 74, retired postal worker, lives alone since his wife passed. I was replacing a corroded section of galvanized pipe in his basement. Teddy sat on the stairs and watched me work and talked about the Colts, like they owed him money personally. When I mentioned the late nights, Teddy got quiet for a second and said, "My first wife, the one before Betty, she had late nights too. Turned out the only filing she was doing was at the Holiday Inn on Washington Street." Then he laughed, the kind of laugh that doesn't have any humor in it, and said, "Keep your eyes open, Russ." A property manager named Davis, sharp, quick, manages about 40 rentals on the east side, hired me to check pipes in a unit he was turning over. While I was under the bathroom sink, he leaned in the doorway and talked about his tenants, and then mentioned, totally unprompted, that a guy named Dylan Barrett had just gotten let go from another personal training gig. "Kid can't show up on time to save his life," Davis said. "His old man must be embarrassed." I didn't know who Dylan Barrett was. Not yet. I just filed the name away. That's how it works. You put a whisper into the water, and the current does the rest. 8 days after the text, my phone rang while I was parked outside a supply house on East Street, eating a ham sandwich from my thermos bag. The screen said Linda Pearson. Linda is 71. Retired school teacher, lives alone on Oak Street in a small brick house with a porch that sags on the left side. Last January, during that cold snap where it hit -8 for 3 days straight, her boiler quit at 2 in the morning. She called me. She'd been a client for years, and I drove over in my long johns and a coat and fixed it in 40 minutes. Didn't charge her. She tried to pay me in banana bread, which, honestly, might have been worth more than my hourly rate. Linda doesn't miss anything. 35 years of watching 8th graders try to cheat on tests will do that to a person. "Russ, dear." Her voice was careful, like she was holding something with both hands. "I don't want to stick my nose in where it doesn't belong, but I've been going back and forth about this all week, and I decided I'd rather you hear it from me than find out some other way." "Okay, Linda. Holly's car, that little silver Civic of hers. I've seen it parked at the Barrett house on Maple Street 3 times this week. Evening time. Frank's been traveling. I know because his porch light's been on a timer. You can tell. Only person in that house is the boy. Dylan." She paused. I could hear her breathing like she'd been holding it. I don't know what it means, Russ. Maybe it's nothing. But 3 times in 1 week didn't sit right with me, and after what you said about her working late, I just thought you should know. Thank you, Linda. Are you all right? I'm all right. If you need anything, sweetheart, you call me. I thanked her again and hung up. Then I sat in my truck in that parking lot with my sandwich in my lap and my hands on the steering wheel, and I squeezed. I squeezed until my knuckles went white and my forearms burned. The sandwich got cold. The coffee got cold. The radio played something I didn't hear. 20 minutes like that. Then I picked up my phone and called Ray. Ray Pittman's garage smelled like solder and motor oil, same as it had since high school. Ray's an electrician, good one too. We grew up 3 blocks apart, played ball together, got our trades at the same vocational program. He got married, got divorced, got the short end of it. Now he lives in a 2-bedroom ranch with a dog named Brisket and a garage full of project cars that'll never get finished. He was sitting on an overturned bucket when I pulled up. He had 2 beers already open, which meant he could hear it in my voice on the phone. I sat down on the old bench seat he'd pulled out of a Chevy and put against the wall, and I told him everything. The text, the new perfume, the credit card charges I'd started noticing, dinners at places we never went together, a charge at a boutique downtown, and now Linda, 3 times at Maple Street. Ray listened. He's good at that, the listening part. It's everything that comes after where he gets into trouble. When I finished, he took a long pull on his beer and said, "Don't go over there. I wasn't planning." Yeah, you were. You were sitting in that truck for 20 minutes thinking about it. I know because I sat in my truck for 20 minutes too, and then I drove to the guy's apartment. He held up his right hand. 2 fingers still had a slight bend where they'd healed wrong. Punched his mailbox, not even him, his mailbox. Broke 2 fingers, got a disorderly conduct charge, and Karen used it in court to paint me as unstable. History of violent behavior, her lawyer called it. 1 mailbox. I lost the house over a mailbox, Russ. The judge looked at me like I was some kind of animal. Karen sat there with her hands folded looking like a saint, and I'm the one who had to move into a rental because I couldn't keep my hands off a piece of aluminum. He set his beer down. Don't be me. Whatever you're going to do it cold. Do it smart. Because the second you show up at that house hot, you've already lost. I nodded. I'd already been thinking about it, but hearing Ray say it made it real. I'm not going to Maple Street, I said. Ray looked relieved. I'm going to call his father. That confused him. I explained. Frank Barrett, I'd been his plumber for 12 years. Replumbed his whole basement in 2016, back when the galvanized was failing and the city was giving people grief about it. Frank's a good man, old school, widower, works in industrial sales and travels 3 weeks out of 4. That house on Maple Street, Frank's house, every nail, every brick, every penny, Frank's. Dylan just lives there because Frank lets him. There's no lease, no rental agreement, nothing. Dylan is a guest in his own father's house, and he doesn't even seem to know it. The most effective thing I could do wasn't to confront the guy sleeping with my wife. It was to call the man whose roof they were using to do it. Ray was quiet for a while. Then he said, "That's either the smartest thing I've ever heard or the coldest. Maybe both. When are you calling?" "Tomorrow morning before my first job." I made the call at 7:15 a.m., sitting in my truck outside a gas station on Keystone Avenue. My hands were steady. My voice was steady. Everything in me wanted to shake, but I'd spent all night running the pressure down. I'd rehearsed it the way I rehearse a bid. Know what you're going to say it. Stop talking. Frank picked up on the second ring. "Frank, it's Russ Donovan." "Russ, how are you, buddy? Don't tell me the sump pump went again." "No, sir, I'm not calling about pipes." Something in my tone changed his. "Okay, what's going on?" "Your son Dylan has been seeing my wife in your house. while you've been traveling. I've had it confirmed by a neighbor who saw Holly's car there 3 times in 1 week. I'm not looking for trouble, and I'm not looking for a fight, but I thought you should know what's happening under your roof." Dead silence, the kind of silence that has weight. Then Frank's voice came back, and it was different. Low, tight, like a wrench torquing down. "Are you sure about this, Russ?" "I'm sure." "How long?" "I don't know exactly. Months at least." More silence. I could hear him breathing through his nose, the way a man does when he's keeping something from boiling over. "Russ, I'm going to handle my end of this. You handle yours. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry, that boy doesn't know the first thing about what it costs to build something. I thought I taught him. I guess I didn't." The call lasted 2 minutes and 40 seconds. I know because I looked at the screen after. Frank didn't come home that day. He came home 2 days later, a day earlier than scheduled, and he didn't tell Dylan he was coming. He walked into his own house at 9:30 at night and found a wine glass on the kitchen counter with lipstick on the rim. Found a woman's scarf draped over the back of the couch. Found the guest towels in the downstairs bathroom damp and folded wrong, the way someone folds them when they don't live there. Dylan was upstairs, alone by then, but the evidence was all over the house like fingerprints. I heard later what happened next. Not from Frank, from the network. The same current that carried my whisper carried this back to me. Frank stood at the bottom of the stairs and said Dylan's name. Just once. And the way he said it made Dylan come down like he was walking to his own sentencing. The next morning, Dylan came home from wherever he'd been. A run, a coffee, who knows? And his key didn't work. There was a bag of his clothes on the porch, jeans, t-shirts, sneakers, all shoved in a black garbage bag. A note on top written in Frank's handwriting on the back of a utility bill envelope. "You have 48 hours to get the rest of your things. Bring someone with you because I won't open the door for you alone." But Frank didn't stop at the locks. He called the insurance company and pulled Dylan off the car policy, the car Frank was still making payments on. He called Verizon and killed Dylan's phone line since it was on the family plan. And then, this is the part that really landed, he called the gym where Dylan still worked part-time, a place owned by a guy Frank had known since Rotary Club days, and told him exactly what kind of man was training his female clients. Dylan went from a comfortable house, a reliable car, a paid phone, and a part-time job that kept him in protein powder and nice shoes to absolutely nothing in about 72 hours. He called Holly. I know because Holly told me later during one of those conversations where she was trying to explain everything and only making it worse. Dylan called her in a panic, voice cracking. "They changed the locks. My dad kicked me out. I don't know what happened." Holly knew exactly what happened. She just didn't think it would happen. Dylan asked if he could stay with her at our house. She said no. I was still there, which tells you everything about where her head was. She wasn't worried about my feelings. She was worried about logistics. He ended up at his friend Nate's place. Nate lived in a 1-bedroom apartment near the fairgrounds with a futon in the living room and a bathroom that smelled like mildew. Dylan Barrett, who 2 weeks ago was doing private training sessions at $25 an hour and sleeping in a house with central air and a 2-car garage, was now sleeping on a futon that sagged in the middle and stocking shelves part-time at a retail store to make rent money he'd never had to think about before. That's what happens when you build nothing of your own. The minute someone pulls the floor out, you're standing on air. I took my $4,200, the money I'd saved for a new van, 14 months of setting aside 50 here, 100 there, and I hired Janet Gallagher. Janet works out of a small office on East Market Street. No big firm name on the door, no marble in the lobby, just her, a paralegal, and a reputation that every divorce lawyer in Marion County respects or fears, depending on which side of the table they're sitting on. She's maybe 5'3", glasses, talks like a woman who's already thought 3 steps past whatever you're about to say. I sat across from her desk and told her everything: the text, the late nights, Linda's tip, the call to Frank. She listened without writing anything down, which made me nervous until I realized she was memorizing it. When I finished, she asked one question: "Have you confronted your wife?" "No," she smiled, small, sharp, like a blade turning in the light. "Good. Don't. Confrontation gives the other party time to prepare, time to hide assets, time to build a narrative, time to call a lawyer. You came to me first. That means we control the tempo." She explained the situation straight. Indiana's a no-fault state, meaning the court doesn't officially care who slept with who. You file for irretrievable breakdown, and that's that. But, and she leaned forward on this part, the court does have discretion on how to split marital property, and a documented pattern of spending marital money on an extramarital relationship, what they call dissipation of assets, can absolutely move the needle. "Start writing things down," she said, "not guesses, facts, dates, times, credit card statements. If she's spending joint money on dinners you never ate, clothes you never saw, hotel rooms you were never in, I want all of it. Don't spy on her. Don't track her phone. Just observe what's in plain sight and write it down." I wrote her a check that emptied my van fund. She looked at it, looked at me, and said, "I'll be worth it." I believed her. For 2 weeks I documented, quietly, methodically, the same way I'd map a plumbing system before I start cutting. You trace every line, find every junction, note every valve, and only then do you pick up a wrench. The joint credit card told the story. 3 dinners at restaurants I'd never been to, not our kind of places either, places with cloth napkins and $40 steaks. A hotel charge from a weekend in September when Holly said she was at a professional development retreat. New clothes from a boutique downtown. The gym membership she'd started in January and never mentioned. $45 a month charged to our joint account, and I only noticed because I was looking. None of it was huge money. That's the thing. She wasn't draining accounts or hiding cash. She was just spending our money, money I earned on my knees under sinks and in crawl spaces, on another man. And she did it right out in the open because she didn't think I was paying attention. The part that really got me, she works in a law office that handles divorces. She'd watched clients get picked apart for exactly this kind of spending. Dissipation, they call it. She saw it happen to other people every week and still believed it would never happen to her. I guess that's how it works. You watch someone else's house flood and think your own pipes are fine. That was the insult underneath the insult, not just the betrayal, the assumption that I was too dull to notice. Janet filed the petition for dissolution of marriage on a Tuesday in mid-November. She filed it with the Marion County Superior Court, and she arranged for Holly to be served at work. At the law firm, during business hours, Holly called me 9 minutes after she got the papers. I was under a house in Irvington, lying on my back in a crawl space, replacing a cracked fitting on a waistline. My phone rang and I saw her name, and I crawled out and sat on the frozen ground and answered it. "Russ, what is this?" "You read it. You work in a law office. You know what it is. Can we talk about this? Can we just sit down and we're past talking, Holly. You know why." Silence, then quieter. It didn't mean anything, and I almost laughed. Almost, because that's the line, right? That's the one they all say. It didn't mean anything, as if that makes it better, as if I threw away 12 years and 2 kids and everything we built for something that didn't even matter to me is supposed to be a comfort. "That's worse," I said. "If it meant something, at least it would have been worth what it cost." She started to say something else, and I hung up, put the phone in my pocket, crawled back under the house, and finished the job. My hands were steady, my chest wasn't, but the hands were steady, and in my line of work, that's what counts. 2 days later, Holly drove to Nate's apartment to find Dylan. I didn't know this at the time. She told me about it weeks later during mediation, when her lawyer was trying to paint a picture of her emotional state, and Holly said more than she should have. She went looking for comfort, a plan, a partner, someone who'd hold her hand and say, "We'll get through this together," because that's what she'd convinced herself this was, a love story with a rough chapter. What she found was a 27-year-old man sitting on a futon in a dim apartment, eating instant noodles and scrolling his phone, and the look on his face when she walked in wasn't relief. It was irritation. "I didn't sign up for this," he told her. "Your husband finding out was your problem to manage, not mine." That's what she told the mediator, word for word. I don't think she realized how damning it was. She thought she was showing how hurt she was. What she was actually showing was that she blew up her family for a man who considered her a convenience. She sat in her car in Nate's parking lot for a long time after that. Engine running, heater on, staring at the dashboard. I wasn't there, but I can picture it perfectly. I've sat in my truck like that enough times to know what it looks like. That moment when all the stories you've been telling yourself go quiet, and the truth is the only voice left in the car. Thanksgiving came and went. The kids spent it with me. Holly went to her mother's in Terre Haute. I made turkey, overcooked if I'm honest, and mashed potatoes from a box, and Tommy and Lily didn't seem to notice that anything was different because I didn't let them notice. That was the job now, not fixing pipes. Fixing the air in the room so my kids could breathe without tasting something wrong. Late November, Holly came to the house. The kids were at a sleepover, Tommy at his friend's, Lily at her cousin's. Holly asked to come in. I said okay. She'd prepared a speech. I could tell because her eyes kept drifting up and to the left, the way people do when they're reciting something they practiced in the mirror. She talked about the marriage being stale, about feeling invisible, about how the affair was a mistake born out of loneliness and how she'd been unhappy for years but didn't know how to say it. I sat at the kitchen table and let her talk. She stood near the counter the way she always did when she was nervous. One hand on the granite, weight on her back foot, like she was ready to bolt. When she finished, I said, "I hear you. And I'm not saying you're wrong about the marriage being hard. Maybe it was. Maybe I worked too much. Maybe I didn't take you to enough restaurants with cloth napkins. But Holly, you didn't come to me. You didn't say any of this when it mattered. You went to a 27-year-old kid who doesn't own a single thing in his life, and you carried on with him in another man's house, and you paid for it with money I earned lying on my back under strangers' kitchens." I paused, not for drama, because the next part was the hardest thing I've ever said. I fix things. That's what I do. Pipes, boilers, faucets. I believe everything can be fixed. But trust isn't a pipe, Holly. There's no fitting for that. There's no sealant. You crack something that doesn't come in replacement parts. She cried, not the performative kind, the real kind, where your face does things you can't control and the sound comes from somewhere below your throat. Part of me, the part that loved her for 12 years, the part that remembered how she looked the day she held Tommy for the first time, wanted to cross the kitchen and put my arms around her. I could feel the pull of it in my chest like gravity. I didn't. Not because I'm cruel, because I knew myself well enough to know that if I held her, I'd start bargaining. I'd start finding ways to make it work. I'd start lying to myself the way she'd been lying to me. And I couldn't afford that, not for me, for Tommy and Lily. Then Holly said something that changed the room. I talked to Greg at the firm. He said your lawyer is the best family attorney in the county." She wiped her face. "He said I should settle." I didn't react. But inside, something shifted. Holly's own boss, a senior partner at a law firm, a man who knows every attorney in the city, had looked at the board and told her she was in checkmate. I hadn't planned that. I hadn't reached out to Greg or leveraged anything. The walls were just closing in from every side because when you build your life on the truth, even the people around the person who lied start confirming it. Holly left that night. She didn't slam the door. She closed it gently, the way you close a door you know you're not coming back through. Now, here's the part I didn't see coming. Nobody did. Dylan Barrett had a girlfriend, a real one, a woman named Paige, 25, worked as a dental hygienist, thought she was in a committed relationship with a charming personal trainer who told her he was focusing on building his brand. Paige didn't find out from me. She didn't find out from Holly or Frank. She found out the way these things always come out, someone at the gym, a woman who'd seen Dylan and Holly together at a coffee shop over the summer, finally connected the dots and told her friend, who told her other friend, who happened to be Paige's coworker. Paige's reaction was nothing like mine. Where I went quiet, she went loud. She didn't tag Dylan on social media. She's too smart for that. But she posted enough that anyone who knew them could fill in the blank. She told every trainer and client at the gym. She told Dylan's remaining contacts. I got the story in pieces over the next few weeks, the way you always do in this city. A client named Kathy, who trained at that gym, mentioned it while I was fixing her bathroom faucet. Davis, the property manager, heard it from the gym owner. Ray picked up some of it from guys at a job site. Each person had a different slice, and by the time I stitched them together, the picture was clear enough. Within 2 weeks, Dylan's name in the Indianapolis fitness community was mud. Nobody wanted to train with the guy who'd been carrying on with a married woman while his girlfriend sat at home trusting him. His social media bled followers. His phone stopped ringing with client inquiries. The career he'd already been bungling through laziness was now buried under something he couldn't charm his way out of. Kathy put it plainest. "That Barrett kid," she said while I tightened her aerator. "Done. His ex-girlfriend torched him. You know he was messing around with a married woman? Some plumber's wife, I heard." I said nothing, wrote up the invoice, but driving home, I sat with it. I didn't feel good exactly. It wasn't satisfaction. It was more like recognition. Somewhere across the city, someone else was lying in bed at 11:47 p.m. staring at a ceiling, and she understood exactly what that silence sounds like. We'd never meet, Paige and me, but we were members of the same rotten club. December. Indianapolis goes gray in December. Not picturesque gray, not movie gray, just flat, cold, low-sky gray that sits on you like a damp coat. The holidays were coming, and the kids were excited in that way kids are when they don't know the ground is shifting. Holly was unraveling at work, slowly, not in any dramatic way, no big scene, no firing, just the slow withdrawal of trust that happens in a professional setting when your personal life becomes common knowledge. She was moved off a client account she'd managed for 2 years. The Friday lunch meetings that the senior staff attended, she stopped getting invited. Nobody said anything to her face, but the temperature in the room had dropped by 10 degrees. She went to Greg Whitfield about it, privately in his office, door closed. Greg was straight with her. I'll give him credit for that. "Holly, I'm not judging your personal life. What you do on your own time is your business. But this firm handles divorces. We have clients going through custody battles, property disputes, the whole mess. If it gets around that my own legal secretary is in the middle of a situation like this, it's not a great look. I'm not letting you go, but I need you to keep a low profile for a while. He wasn't mean about it. He wasn't even wrong. But it was one more wall closing in. The affair hadn't just wrecked her marriage, it was seeping into everything else like water through a bad foundation. Slow, steady, and impossible to stop once it starts. Then Denise called. Holly's mother lives in Terre Haute, about 70 miles west. Raised Holly and her sister on a teacher's salary after Holly's dad left. Practical woman. The kind who says what she means and means what she says and doesn't have time for anything in between. I was parked outside a supply house, writing up an estimate on a notepad balanced on my steering wheel, when her number showed up. I almost didn't answer. I figured she was calling to defend Holly, to tell me I was being too hard, to ask me to reconsider for the grandkids' sake. Russell, Denise, I'm not going to waste your time with small talk. I raised that girl to know better, and she didn't do better, and that's between her and her conscience. You have been a good husband. You've been a better father than her own father ever was. Whatever happens with the courts and the lawyers and the paperwork, I want you to know you still have family as far as I'm concerned. Tommy and Lily are my blood and yours, and I will not let her use those children as leverage. Not while I'm breathing. I didn't say anything for a few seconds. Couldn't. Russell, you there? I'm here, Denise, thank you. You don't have to thank me for telling the truth. That should be free. We talked for a few more minutes. She asked about the kids. I told her Tommy was doing good in school, that Lily wanted a kitten. Normal stuff. The kind of conversation that feels like standing in a warm kitchen. After we hung up, I sat in that truck and cried. First time since all of this started. I didn't cry when I read the text. I didn't cry when Linda called. I didn't cry when I filed the papers or when Holly stood in my kitchen begging me to stay. But Holly's own mother calling me to say I was family. That broke something open. It lasted maybe 3 minutes. Then I wiped my face, started the engine, and drove to my next job, because that's how it works. You feel what you feel, and then you go back to work. Mediation was in December, court-ordered, standard procedure. The mediator was a retired judge named Arthur Price, white-haired, reading glasses on a chain, the kind of man who'd seen so many marriages come apart in front of him that he probably couldn't look at a wedding invitation without doing a cost-benefit analysis. Holly's lawyer was a younger guy, decent enough, but clearly the second or third choice she'd landed on after the better attorneys in town were either too expensive or already had conflicts. Janet told me later that at least 2 firms Holly contacted declined because they'd worked with Janet before and didn't want to be across the table from her. I don't know if that's true, but it sounds like Janet. Holly's side pushed for a 50-50 split on everything. The house, the savings, the truck, all of it. Clean down the middle. Janet let them make their case. Then she opened her folder. She walked through it piece by piece. The house, purchased 12 years ago, maintained entirely by Russ. New deck, built by hand. Bathroom remodel, done by Russ over 2 weekends. Plumbing upgrades, electrical improvements coordinated by Russ with licensed contractors. The house's current market value was substantially higher than when we bought it, and a meaningful portion of that increase came from labor I performed with my own hands. Then the credit card statements, dinners, the hotel, clothes, the gym membership. All of it on the joint account, all of it documented with dates and amounts. Arthur Price looked at Holly over his glasses. Mrs. Donovan, were these expenditures made with your husband's knowledge? No, Holly said, almost a whisper. Price nodded, didn't lecture, just wrote something on his notepad. Then Holly's lawyer tried his last play. He argued that my plumbing income might be partially unreported. Cash jobs, under-the-table work, the kind of thing people assume about trades guys because they see us get paid in cash sometimes. Janet didn't even blink. She opened a second folder and laid out 3 years of tax returns, every one prepared by a CPA I'd been using since I took over the business from my dad. Every dollar, every job, every receipt documented. I keep records the way I keep pipe inventory, labeled, organized, and ready to go. Holly's lawyer looked at the returns, looked at his legal pad, looked at Holly, and I watched the air go out of him like a tire hitting a nail. That move didn't just fail, it made Holly look desperate, and it made me look like exactly what I am, a man who does things right. Price recommended a settlement structure that leaned my direction. Not by a landslide, courts don't do that in Indiana, but enough. February, divorce finalized. A Tuesday, which felt about right. Not a dramatic day of the week, just a work day. I sat in the courtroom in the same khakis and button-down I wear to church on the rare Sundays I go. Holly was across the aisle in a blazer, looking thinner than she had in October. Her lawyer shuffled papers. Janet sat next to me like a stone wall. The judge read the terms. I got the house. I'd refinanced to buy out Holly's reduced share. Kept the truck. Joint custody, week on, week off. Holly got her car with $8,000 still on the loan, her personal savings, which wasn't much, and 18 months of modest spousal maintenance reduced from what she'd asked for. It was done in 40 minutes. 12 years of marriage, 2 kids, a house, a life wrapped up in less time than it takes me to install a water heater. Afterward, Holly and I stood in the parking lot of the Marion County Courthouse. It was cold, February in Indiana cold, the kind that gets into your teeth. Our breath made clouds between us. "I'm sorry, Russ," she said. "I know that doesn't fix anything." I looked at her, really looked at her, maybe for the first time since October. She looked tired, not defeated, tired. The kind of tired that comes from watching everything you thought you had slip through your fingers and knowing you're the one who opened them. "No," I said, "it doesn't." I got in my truck, turned the key, waited for the engine to catch on the 3rd try, and drove to my next job. March came in wet and raw the way it does here, and something I didn't plan for started happening. My phone rang more, not a little more, a lot more. Linda Pearson told her book club about me, not the divorce. She's not that kind of person. She told them about the boiler in January, about how I came at 2 in the morning and didn't charge her. And then, because people talk, the rest of it came out sideways, the way things do in a city that feels like a small town once you've been in enough living rooms. The story traveled, not as gossip, as a recommendation. A property manager I'd never met called and asked me to bid on 12 rental units. A church on the east side, a place I'd never set foot in, called because a member on their board said, "If you want someone you can trust, call Donovan Plumbing." I wasn't leveraging anything. I didn't post my story online. I didn't ask for sympathy or referrals. But it turns out that when you handle the worst thing that ever happens to you with your head up and your mouth shut, people notice. In a city like Indianapolis, where the trades community is tight and word of mouth is worth more than any advertisement, character turned out to be the best marketing I never paid for. By the end of March, I had more work than I could handle alone, so I hired my first employee, a 22-year-old kid named Jordan Cole. Jordan's grandmother was a client. She'd been after me for a year to take him on. "That man will teach you how to work and how to be decent," she told Jordan. "Far as I can tell, those are the same thing." Jordan showed up on his first day with brand new boots and a willingness to crawl under anything I pointed at. He reminded me of me at that age, quiet, strong hands, not afraid of dirt. I started him on the basics, how to read a system, how to listen for the hum in the copper, how to treat a client's home like it matters, because it does. Dylan Barrett's life at 6 months out looked like this. warehouse job on the west side, studio apartment in Speedway, barely speaking to his father. Page's posts had been archived, but the damage was baked in. His personal training career in Indianapolis was finished, not because of one catastrophe, but because of the accumulation, the lost gigs, the firings, the gym owner who wouldn't take his calls, the clients who quietly switched trainers. He wasn't ruined. He was 27. He had his health, his youth, time on his side, but the easy road was closed. Everything from here on he'd have to build from scratch, and that was a skill nobody had ever made him learn. I didn't hate him. I know that's hard to believe. But hating Dylan Barrett would be like hating the rain for getting in through a hole in the roof. He wasn't the problem. He was just the water that found the gap. The gap was already there. April, 6 months since filing. I was at Linda Pearson's, fixing a kitchen faucet. Simple job. Worn cartridge, 10-minute swap. I could have sent Jordan, but Linda was special. She earned the house call from the boss. Afterward, she sat me down at her kitchen table, same table where she'd graded papers for 3 decades and poured coffee into a mug that said "World's Okayest Teacher." She watched me drink for a moment, the way she does, with that look that says she's about to say something you're not expecting. "My niece asked about you." "Your niece?" "Megan. She's a teacher, 4th grade over at School 70 on Emerson. Has her own little house, been divorced about 3 years, no kids." Linda stirred her coffee with the same spoon she'd probably been using since 1987. "She saw you carrying my groceries last month. She asked who you were." "Linda, I didn't tell her your business, not a word. She just saw a man doing something kind and asked a question, that's all." I shook my head. "I'm not ready." Linda reached across and patted my hand. Her skin was soft and papery, and her grip was stronger than you'd think. "Honey, I'm not rushing you. Not one bit. I'm just telling you that a woman saw a man carrying an old lady's groceries and thought, that's the kind of man I've been looking for, that's all. The rest is up to you. Whenever you're ready, if you're ever ready." I finished my coffee, washed the mug because Linda would have done it herself and she shouldn't have to, grabbed my toolbox and headed out. The truck had 193,000 miles on it now, radio on, thermos full. The April sun was doing that thing it does in Indiana, where it finally breaks through after 5 months of gray, and everything looks like someone wiped the windshield clean. I pulled up to a house I'd never been to. New client, referral from somebody at the church. Grabbed my toolbox, walked to the front door, and knocked. A woman answered. It wasn't Megan. It wasn't anyone I knew. Just a woman with a leaky pipe and a look of relief that someone had shown up to fix it. And for the first time in 8 months, I caught myself smiling before I even said hello. "Hi, I'm Russ. I'm here to fix your pipes."